Welcome to the Talking Free podcast. As the girl who has always been told she talks too much, can speak with a mouthful of marbles underwater, and can sell ice to Eskimos, I have found the perfect platform to have my say, freely. I am here to share with real people, having raw conversations about authentic stories. It is a place where you can feel safe discussing anything and everything. These stories will make you laugh, cry, debate, wonder, intrigue, and get curious about life as you talk free with Trudie Marie. Please note that the following podcast may contain discussions or topics that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. I aim to provide informative and supportive content, but understand that certain themes may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in need of support while listening, I encourage you to pause the podcast and take a break. Remember that it is okay to prioritise your well-being and seek assistance from trained professionals. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is the first brave step to healing. If you require immediate support, please consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or a crisis intervention service in your area. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself as you engage with the content of this podcast. Welcome to episode 1, The Big Move. When I thought about creating my podcast and what topic I would go to begin with, I looked immediately to my network and what was going on inside of there. And what I discovered was that a lot of people are either moving or wanting to move, and something is holding them back. And that got me thinking too about my own experience in moving. So since 2000, I have lived in 11 different towns across 2 different states and had 21 addresses. Yes, I am the original gypsy girl. And look, some of those moves have been for work, due to divorce or separation, due to houses being sold, so having to move from one address to another. And all alongside that, I have made these moves with my 2 children. And honestly, we worry about our kids moving, and they are more resilient than we are. They seem to just go with the flow and adapt really easily. Sometimes we need to actually take a leaf out of their book. But today, my podcast, I will talk about those moves and where I've moved and why I've moved, and then go through the lessons that I discovered from doing that and actually taking the time to reflect over those moves. So I take you back to 2000, and I moved from Perth to Kalgoorlie with my husband at the time. He had been given a job opportunity in Kalgoorlie, and I wasn't afraid to go back because this is my home community. I grew up in the goldfields and I felt like I was going home. So we started off in a small unit in Kalgoorlie, and then I fell pregnant with my daughter, and we moved to our first home there. And then I fell pregnant with my son, and the house we were living in got sold, so we ended up moving to a larger, nicer house where we could raise the 2 kids. And that was all going well for, the first couple of years. In 2003, my husband then was given an opportunity to go to Mount Isa to work, and we had visited Mount Isa on a previous trip to see my family in Townsville. So we thought, why not? You don't get this opportunity every day. Let's go. So towards the end of 2003, we moved to Mount Isa. I hated every minute I was there. It's a very cliquey, kind of localized town, and I just never felt like I fit in. I found myself home every day with the kids, alone, trying to do the mother thing. Hubby was at work all the time, and yeah, I hated it. So 12 months later, we moved back to Kalgoorlie in 2004. And we kind of did the runaround there too, because the original house we lived in, that got sold, and we moved to another house, and then that got sold due to the couple divorcing and needed to sell the investment property, and we ended up in the next house, which is where I stayed until 2006 when my husband left me. Now, at that stage, I moved temporarily in with my mum and my stepdad before making the huge decision to move back across the country to Townsville, where I had other family, and have a fresh start after the divorce. So packed up the kids at the end of 2006 and moved to Townsville, and we managed to get a small unit that I lived in there. And then I met a partner and we moved in with him and lived in his house. So we were there until the beginning of 2009, when my partner at the time took a job opportunity to work and live in the town where he was currently working. So we moved to Middlemount, which is in the middle of the coal basin, and started our life out there. Unfortunately, that relationship ended and I needed to move. Now, at the time, my mum was living in Mackay and that was an option. However, accommodation and the rental market was crazy at the beginning of the end of 2009. So we found a house in Proserpine, basically the gateway to the Whitsunday Islands, and it was only an hour north of Mackay. So I was still close to my mum. So we moved there, and the kids and I had one of the best summers I think I've ever experienced in around Airlie Beach and the Whitsundays, and just having a grand old time. And I would have quite happily stayed in Proserpine. However, I could not find work. We had a cyclone that year, which had really rocked the tourist industry, and I just couldn't get any work. So an opportunity came up for me to work in Mackay, and I was able to find accommodation in Mackay through a friend that was a little bit cheaper than normal. And that was great because we were like living on the beach pretty much. It was an awesome time for me and the kids. So we stayed there. And again, I would have quite happily stayed there, but my kids came back to WA on a trip to see their dad, and they met their cousin. They caught up with their older brother, and they came back and said, "Mum, we want to go back to WA. That's where the rest of our family is." And I felt guilty at that stage as a mum who had literally been pulling her kids from pillar to post. And I say that because honestly, my kids had or went to the same number of primary schools for years they were at primary school. So I decided to pack the kids up, and at the end of 2010, we moved from Mackay back to Perth. And we moved into a really small unit. Again, the market was crazy. It was really difficult to find something. And we were happy there until the owners decided to sell. Now, lucky for us, we managed to find a unit exactly around the corner. And I kid you not, it was literally on the street around the corner. And we stayed there for a couple of years until the owner wanted to raise the rent in a falling market. And at the time I was working as a property manager, and I was like, I refuse to do this. So I took it as an opportunity to move closer to where the kids would be going to high school, and also looked for a place that was pet friendly so we could take on having a pet again, because that was something in all our moves we had not been able to have. So we moved to a house, and then I met my current husband, and we decided to build. So we stayed in that house until our new house was built. And during that period, I joined WA Police, my husband joined WA Police, and we took the opportunity to try regional policing. So my children, or our children, stayed in the house in Perth, and my husband and I moved to Leonora in 2020. We stayed there for 15 months due to some unforeseen circumstances which caused us to leave, and we moved to Narrogin in 2021. And we spent the next 2 years there while my husband was policing, and then he took an opportunity to transfer to Minganoo. So just in the last 4 years, we've moved from the goldfields to the Great Southern, and we're now up in the Midwest Gascoyne. So as you can see, I have travelled across the states, around the state, and around the cities or towns we've been living in various different locations. And I don't regret that for a minute. I know that some people have probably lived in their same house their whole entire life or their whole married life, but I've not been that way. I've been a traveller, I've been a gypsy, and yeah, I have gained so much wisdom and knowledge from that period. So one of the first things I want to talk about learning about myself, or just about the moving, is that it always gave me a chance to change my style and have a fresh look. So whether that was new pictures in the house or new linens on the bed or doing something to match kind of the decor of the house. Bearing in mind, in a lot of my rentals, I also treated them like my home. So I spent a lot of time in some of those places actually giving it a fresh coat of paint, putting up fresh curtains, doing some landscaping. Landlords loved me, but I always wanted to make wherever I lived feel like home and feel like home for my children. So I could change the style to suit that, which was a lot of fun. It also gave me the chance to Marie Kondo my life. And I know that Marie Kondo's way of cleaning out your life has become very popular in the last couple of years. But I've been doing this for like the last 20. So every time we moved, it was a chance to clear out the old. It was a chance to work out what was really important and have less attachment to material items. Don't get me wrong, I still carry around boxes of my children's baby stuff, boxes of sentimental items that I own, family albums of photos and things like that. But in general, we have for the most part what we need, and it was always a chance to, clear out, have a garage sale and get rid of the crap. We don't hoard, and charity shops got their offload and the tip got its offload as well. So we only ever took what we needed. One of the main things about moving around that I have absolutely loved is meeting new people. And I have met people from all walks of life with various backgrounds, various experiences that I would never have met. Now, I know that there are some people that I went to school with that still mix within the same circles of people. And I'm not saying that they don't have other friends and outside experiences, but they are the same circles that they move in. And I've not been one of those people. I have acquaintances and colleagues and friends literally all over the country from wherever I have lived or worked. And I love that because they have taught me so much about myself and so much about life. My kids have met amazing people along the way and had different experiences, as well as they've made new friends in each new town or each new school. And you can't put a price on that type of experience. On top of that, you get to experience new places to live. And for a lot of these places, maybe I'd visited them once or twice. Maybe I'd never visited them. I know when I moved to Middlemount, I'd never been there before in my life and wondered what I was getting into, and then realised it was not really much different to the town I grew up in. But inside of that, we got to travel and explore the areas around where we lived. So when we lived in Mount Isa, we got to drive the 900 kilometres or thereabouts to Townsville. And in driving that, we got to go through the small towns that you would never otherwise experience. So places like Richmond and Hughenden that I can remember driving through with the kids and stopping for lunch and stopping to explore those little towns. We also went up to Karumba, I think it is, in the Gulf, and seeing that part of Australia. And then when I lived in Townsville, I got to explore the area around Townsville, so south to Ayr and Bowen, and then anywhere heading up north, up to Cairns, up to Port Douglas, up to the Atherton Tablelands. And not just for, the holiday experience, but actually just going and exploring the local area and giving the kids a chance to discover somewhere. When we went to Mackay, I remember my grandfather passing away and me and my mum and my two kids driving down to central New South Wales and going the back roads and taking the kids down. And those experiences are something that you can never get again. And if I ask my two kids to this day, they remember that trip fondly of staying at a town called Injune in the middle of July in a pub, because that's exactly where we stayed. And they got to see those sorts of places. They got to see cotton on the side of the road. We got to see some other different towns that we went through, all inside of that trip, which we would never have done had we flown. We'd never have done if we weren't living on that side of the country. And it's those precious moments and memories that I think of fondly when I think about the experiences that I've given my kids. Coming back to Perth, we obviously got to experience city life for the first time with my kids. I had moved from the Goldfields to Perth when my parents moved us, before going back to Kalgoorlie with my husband. But this was the first time that my kids really got to live in a city, and we got to experience everything that Perth had to offer. And we kind of treated it initially like we were tourists, because I took my kids to all those places that you only ever talk about, or you take for granted knowing them because you've grown up with them. And then in 2020, when my husband and I moved to Leonora, I felt, again, like I was going back home to the Goldfields. It was where I was born, and my husband is American and he grew up in Texas, so he's not afraid of moving around either. But going back to Leonora was something different for both of us and a new opportunity. And we took time we had the opportunity of working out on the lands and getting to experience that, but also just going around the local area and playing tourist so that you get to see a part of what it is. And likewise, when we moved to Narrogin, we spent a lot of time and a lot of our days off actually exploring the Great Southern. And in that exploring, we got to discover now what's become our favourite restaurant and place to go. So a big shout out to the Dam in Denmark, because that's our favourite place to go. But we only discovered that by exploring our local area. And now that we're located up in Mingenew, which is 4 hours north of Perth, we are close to Dongra, we're close to Geraldton, we're close to various tourist attractions in this area. And we try to take advantage of, again, on Steve's days off, is going and exploring the area and not just being sort of attached in our own little space in our own little house, and actually getting out and about and learning about the places and people around us. And even within the community, we live in a very small community at the moment, which is predominantly farming, and we're learning about something that we actually know nothing about and knew nothing about prior. Like, we both don't come from farming backgrounds, but we are slowly absorbing all the information and settling into the community to discover, again, something new. So it's those types of experiences and moments that I absolutely love over the last 24 years of moving around. And initially, like back in the day, I used to feel guilty with my kids. And, when I said that they went to as many primary schools as years that they were at primary school, you do feel that sense of like, am I doing the right thing? But they are the most resilient kids now. They have experienced things that other kids would never have experienced had they not moved. And I compare with my husband's son, who is the similar age to my two, and he's only ever grown up in Perth. He's only ever lived in Perth. And he doesn't really know too much outside of that. But my kids are well-travelled and well-versed around the country. And my son still lives in Perth and he's got a thriving, life of what he's up to. But my daughter 12 months ago moved to Bali. And I think at 22, to take that leap of faith and move to another country, was all inside of what I had created for her in moving around, because she wasn't scared. You know, she had her doubts and she had her considerations to think of, but overall she was willing to take that leap of faith because moving wasn't as scary as what it is for most people. And in a study, I know that moving house, or just moving in general, is one of the third highest stresses or traumas that people can go through, and that's behind losing a loved one or going through a divorce. So I get that as a stressor, it is right up there. And I feel like now I've become such an expert at it that it doesn't even feel hard to move. I actually almost feel excited about the challenge of what it's going to provide and the opportunities that it's going to bring to me. So if you are thinking about moving, I know that I've had friends that have moved from Victoria to WA. I've got friends that have moved from Victoria up to the Gold Coast. I've got friends that have moved from country WA back to the city. I've got my sister who has moved to Bali with her family, and obviously my daughter that's moved. And lots of people are thinking in the same way, whether they're just downsizing houses because they've become empty nesters, or whether they're just looking for a change of scenery, or whatever it takes, even work-wise, like what it takes to move house and to pack up and go. So my tip is to take that leap of faith. Make the move and see what new opportunities arise for you. See what new people you meet. Travel and explore the new area that you go to. There is a wealth of knowledge out there on the internet before you take these moves. You've got places like, domain and realestate.com to explore houses and, suburbs, and get information that way before you actually move. But if you're thinking about it, stop thinking and take action, and do whatever it takes to give yourself something new, something exciting, and move into a brand new future. So if you are in that space and you do want to move, then check out the show notes and I will pop a link to a free resource in there, which is something I have created as my go-to things. And I don't mean just about, the normal checklist you get when you're moving with your removalist or whatever, but just some tips and tricks that I've learnt over the years of downsizing, cleaning out. And when you are cleaning out, clean out drawer by drawer, cupboard by cupboard, room by room, the shed, the storeroom, whatever it is, and just really think about what you need, what you don't need, what can be given to somebody else in need, what can be just thrown away because those broken items are probably never going to be fixed, and use this as a new opportunity to step into a brand new life, a life that you get to create, a life that you get to live, and ultimately a life you get to love. Thank you for tuning in to the Talking Free podcast today. If you have an idea for a future episode or a story you'd like to share, then please message me, as I am always up for real, raw, and authentic conversations. If you love what you are hearing, then please be sure to subscribe to hear all the latest episodes, and spread the word to your family, friends, and colleagues so they too can listen in. If you are sharing on social media, then please be sure to tag me at _Trudie _Marie _ so I can personally acknowledge you. I am always open to comment about how these episodes have resonated with you. It would also mean the world to me if you were to leave a 5-star review to ensure the Talking Free podcast is heard by more listeners around the world. And remember, lead with love as you live this one wild and precious life.